Well, all right. Without much further ado, I will go ahead and open us up today. Distinguished guests, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. It is a great pleasure to welcome you here. My name is Lesley Pories, and I am Manager of Sector Strategy at water.org. First, I'd like to extend a special welcome to the Additional Secretary of the Ministry of Jal Shakti, India, Shri Bharat Lal. I also want to thank our partners and co-conveners, Wateraid, UNICEF, the CEO Water Mandate, and SWA for all their support in helping us organize this event. Our conversation today is examining both partnerships and finance for climate resilient water and sanitation, aka WASH. This conversation is critical because it takes money to achieve anything, especially the scale of what we're trying to accomplish. And meanwhile, that scale is so great that no one entity can do it alone. During Finance Day here at the Water and Climate Pavilion, we talked about how, according to the latest updates, developed countries are not on track to fulfill their Paris Agreement commitment to mobilize $100 billion a year in climate finance for developing countries. Specific efforts to mobilize private finance in developing countries have also stalled. The OECD emphasized that those working on WASH and water need to make explicit linkages between their work and climate action. And UNICEF highlighted the need for multi-country proposals to deliver climate finance for WASH at scale. Implicit and explicit in the above are finance and partnerships. There's not one formula for getting either of those two tactics done right, and the agenda we have outlined for today is designed to unpack different approaches. Part one of our conversation will focus upon government-led initiatives that create the positive regulatory and financial ecosystems needed for market-based, climate-resilient WASH solutions to thrive. Alex Knezovich of the Toilet Board Coalition will moderate a roundtable where we will hear from India about the vision, Kenya about the regulation, Bangladesh about inclusivity, and the Philippines about the plan. We'll then transition over to Jason Morrison of the CEO Water Mandate, the Water Resilience Coalition, and the Pacific Institute to moderate a second roundtable that highlights opportunities and examples of good target setting and business investments in climate resilient WASH solutions for the private sector to build upon and accelerate progress towards NDCs and NAPs. This roundtable will feature the business case for climate resilient WASH from Jason, as well as the WASH for Work Coalition and Wateraid, Evershed, Sutherland, Diageo, and Brascom. We've got a lot of exciting speakers to hear from, so I will turn it over to Alex to kick us off.
Thank you, Lesley. Appreciate the opening. And as Lesley mentioned, I'm Alex Knezovich. I'm the Director of Operations at the Toilet Board Coalition, and it's a great pleasure to be with you all here today. Without further ado, Mr. Bharat Lal, Additional Secretary for the Ministry of Jal Shakti in India, I'd like to begin with you. In India's population of 1.4 billion, 300 million are affected by drought, with another 97 million affected by flooding. Water management is an important aspect of adaptation efforts. Better management means less waste and also allows for local aquifers to be relieved of stress and exploitation. In 2019, India has launched the Jal Jeevan Mission to provide piped drinking water to all Indian households by 2024. Mr. Lal, what has the vision of the Jal Jeevan Mission set into motion throughout the country?
Hi, Alex. Good afternoon, and good afternoon to everyone. Thank you very much for having me here. And indeed, it's a privilege to be speaking in with such august audience. Let's understand the overall scenario in India. As you have noticed that since last 7-8 years, there has been concerted effort to improve the quality of life and ease of living. And our Prime Minister, Mr. Narendra Modi, is committed for environmental conservation and basically climate change. And you have seen that India, well, in last 7-8 years, it built 110 million toilets as a first step. 150 million families have been provided gas connection. So in a country like ours, where we have got 1.37 billion population, out of which around 970 million people are living in rural areas. I think improving their quality of life is the most paramount factor. Well, we have focused on renewable energy, and today we stand at fourth position in the world when it comes to installed capacity of renewable energy. And 38% of our energy basket is basically renewable. Now, in this scenario, kindly see that 1/3 part of our country is basically water stressed. And ensuring clean water is one of the topmost priority for the government. So in 2019, Prime Minister announced a program, Jal Jeevan Mission, basically to ensure clean tap water to every rural home in the country by 2024. And when we started this program in 2019, only 17% rural household had tap water connections. So provision of tap water supply in a rural area was limited to only 17%. And from 17%, we have to reach to 100% by 2024 in 5 years. So that is the speed and scale which is expected for implementation of this kind of program. And there has been a method in this whole planning. First, as we all understand that in a country like ours, whatever rainfall basically takes place and little bit snowfall. So this precipitation has to be captured. And this precipitation has to be used because in our country, let's say average 25 to 30 days are rainy days. So whatever water we capture, we have to use it for whole year. And there are certain parts of the country where basically next year might be a drought year. So first and foremost, that if you have to collect, we have to harvest the rainwater, it means we have to stop open defecation. And that's why Swachh Bharat Mission and this toilet our sanitation campaign was launched in 2014. And today India has become an open defecation free country. And secondarily, what we did that all water related subject we brought at one place. So Ministry of Jal Shakti was created. And third, what Prime Minister keeps on saying repeatedly that water has to become everybody's business. It should not be only government alone. So first, and to involve everybody, each and every individual in the country, basically every organization, civil society, international partners, we launched what we call Jal Shakti Abhiyan, our water conservation campaign in 2019. Of course, because of COVID-19, we had certain setbacks, but that campaign basically galvanized the whole country basically on water conservation, and basically it brought a new kind of water literacy in the communities, in the rural areas. And you understand that in our country, roughly 85% water is used in agriculture. So if our villages, our village community, our farmers, basically they get more enlightened, they have access to new technology and fund, I think they can start saving water. In this context, Jal Jeevan Mission was announced on 15th August 2019, which is our Independence Day. And basically this point, I think this Independence Day, the significance of the occasion is that in India, fetching water is the responsibility of women and basically girls, basically who accompany their mothers. So the most important part was that it was freedom from this drudgery to women and children, that water should be made available in their home. Pipe water in adequate quantity, of prescribed quality with adequate pressure and regular supply. So this mission started in 2019. We have to cover roughly 192 million households. 192 million households, plus schools, plus Anganwadi center or creches, plus hostels, plus community centers. You know. So roughly you can say that 200 million points we have to make available clean water. And since then, I think we have adopted a strategy. Most of the focus is on water security. That village community has to be empowered. They have to be educated, trained, resources have to be put at their disposal, and they should be preparing their village action plan. And the village action plan basically contains 4 components: drinking water source strengthening and augmentation, drinking water supply, grey water collection and treatment and its reuse, and fourthly, operation and maintenance. So for this purpose, we have made a provision of $51 billion in 5 years. And well, we have involved sector partners. all international organizations, including UNICEF, or WHO, UNOPS, and other our reputed trust and foundations and NGO, they are partnering with us at the policy level, at the capacity building level, at the training level. Second level is at the implementation level, where basically in villages, NGOs and civil society, they become partner in the form of implementation support agency. So they help villagers in planning, implementation, operation, maintenance, and management. Whereas the technical department are our public health engineers, basically they provide technical assistance to people. Last year, because of COVID, we realized the value of hand washing probably in much better way. And we launched a 100-day campaign, basically to bring awareness among people to make provision of clean tap water supply, plus hand washing facility, and running water, tap water, pipe water in toilets, basically in schools, Anganwadi centers, are creches, and hostels, community centers everywhere. The idea is that our children, basically, they should have access to clean water, pipe water supply. And today, today one can say that in India, from 17% coverage, we have reached to 44%. So today, roughly 84 million households are having clean tap water supply. We have started from 32 million and we have reached to 84 million. Similarly, 79% schools. In last 1 year, we have been able to make provision of clean tap water supply, including hand washing facility, including pipe water in toilets, and grey water treatment, as well as rainwater harvesting. Similar thing has been done in creches, where basically children have the access to clean water. What we have done, one more thing, basically, that say capacity building of our public health engineer, because they are basically civil engineers, they have become public health engineer, and we are trying to convert them into social engineer and utility manager, because they have to handhold village community or village level institution. So this part is going on, and simultaneously we have started in big way water quality monitoring and surveillance. Our public health laboratories, which are having roughly 2,000, we have opened to general public, and they can get their water sample tested. And people in every village are being trained, 5% in every village, who are basically, they can test and they can upload the data on the system, and our government agencies, responsible people, have to take remedial action. So overall, basically, we are trying to achieve a water security where paucity of water does not become a limiting factor in our quest for socioeconomic development and economic growth. Over to you, Alex.
Thank you, Mr. Baratlal. Appreciate it. And the vision of India has permeated, I think, throughout the globe in terms of water and sanitation. David Auerbach, I'd like to now turn to you. As CEO of Sanergy, your business is a pioneer and a leader in the sanitation space and has worked closely with the government of Kenya. From your experience, how can policy enable innovation and market development for climate resilient and climate positive wash solutions? Over to you, David.
Great, thanks, Alex. Thank you to the minister for sharing his thoughts there. They were really great to hear. So I'm here in Nairobi, Kenya, running a company called Sanergy, which, as Alex mentioned, is providing safe sanitation for residents living in low-income areas, particularly in urban informal settlements, which of course are areas that are highly focused, highly susceptible to the impact of climate change, with rapid flooding. With these areas being prone to the impact around rapid flooding. We've taken a very clear strategy to work closely with the Kenyan government to be able to improve upon the policy environment for us to be able to serve these residents. Specifically, and this has been quite a long journey, but we're really seeing incredible fruits from this right now. About 5 years ago, Kenya launched the Environmental and Sanitation Health Policy in 2016, and that policy really worked to engage the private sector as well as the public, as well as nonprofits, to be able to bring their voice into this discussion. And what happened is that we've been able to actually include a really important innovations, things like non-sewerage sanitation, as well as the promotion of the reuse economy too. Both of these, we believe, are solved for two key issues. One, the former is being able to successfully reach those in the hardest to reach areas, and two, in the latter, lower the overall cost to be able to deliver these services through the private sector involvement in being able to safely manage and treat waste. We've seen really good results from this, and that's now being ratified through the National Sanitation Policy, and Kenya is the head of it has one of the most progressive policies there is. And what's more, they've been actually able to be a guide for what is also called the Africa Sanitation Policy Guidelines. And so this is a Pan-African initiative led through the African Ministerial Council on Water that's actually enabling, promoting more climate positive sanitation approaches, specifically by focusing on ability to reuse and the environmental benefits that come from that, and then also non-sewage sanitation and being able to specifically serve residents who are most vulnerable to these challenges.
Thanks, David. So then perhaps just diving specifically into that climate perspective. So can you speak a bit more to how leveraging renewable supply chains can help build that harmonious relationship between communities and industry?
Sure. Yeah, no, it's a win-win. I mean, look, these cities are growing so fast. And, as a result, there is, unfortunately, much more waste, and this is both sanitation waste and just in general organic waste too. And the pace that traditional infrastructure approaches have been going at in not just Kenya but in most countries, it's unable to meet. It's not keeping up. And so what we need to do is actually come up with offer ways for us to be able to solve for this challenge in the short, medium, and what I think will be the long term too, but at least in the immediate term, to be able to safely manage that waste. This is beneficial, of course, to citizens because they're receiving much better services. And for reuse businesses, this offers tremendous opportunity because this is a feedstock that they need to be able to convert waste into everything from black soldier fly larvae for insect proteins to safe organic fertilizers to briquettes. All of these things, we are, it's making it easier for the private sector to thrive. And I will say, from the policy environment, by having clear regulation and clear prioritization of these issues, it enables us to also access the capital too that we need. And you can even see this because, like, for example, just yesterday or 2 days ago, the UK and Kenya announced a new 66 million pound program just for climate finance that has a waste focus to it. This is really significant for organizations like us, but I do think it's reflective of because Kenya is a place where the regulation is clear enough that it is suitable for investors to come in.
Thank you, David. Excellent. And now I'd like to turn to you, Haseen. Haseen is the country director for Wateraid Bangladesh. Haseen, thank you for joining us. Bangladesh is home to 164 million people, with 37 million in the coastal belt who are particularly climate vulnerable. Haseen, can you share about how the government of Bangladesh has partnered with organizations such as Wateraid to incorporate accessibility into its WASH strategy?
Thank you so much, Alex. It's a pleasure for me to be here. Let me start with a specific example. The government of Bangladesh has recently approved its Water Supply and Sanitation Strategy 2021, where Wateraid Bangladesh acted as the member secretary of the task force, which was responsible for formulation of the strategy. Similarly, government developed its proposed strategy partnering with Wateraid, and this proposed strategy specifically mentions how to address the people from hard-to-reach areas including climate hotspots, and also encourages private sector engagement and access to market. The government is currently implementing a number of projects which reflect the proposed strategy. It also initiated a large-scale project to address the people from hard-to-reach and rural areas through microfinance institutes, connecting people with the market. Wateraid Bangladesh is in the process of supporting government a few more policies and strategies at this moment to ensure no one left behind. Apart from that, Wateraid, together with the ICAD, International Center for Science, Climate Change, we undertook a policy research, and where we found that the WASH policies need to consider long-term climate change impacts and smooth funding flow for sustainable WASH services in the long run. We are now pursuing the government as well as other development partners to address the recommendations of the study. Over to you, Alex.
Thank you, Haseen. Appreciate that. And we heard from Mr. Bharatlal about India's Village Action Plan and engaging communities in the implementation. Could you give us some examples of how WASH communities in Bangladesh are working at coming up with solutions and Wateraid's role in that as well?
Definitely. Let me tell you that the coastal belt of Bangladesh is already facing the impacts of climate change. People are not having drinkable water due to high salinity. Wateraid Bangladesh demonstrated a model which is named as Women-Led Water Entrepreneurship Model, where women groups have been formed, trained, and facilitated to run the water business at mini scale within the communities by supplying water from reverse osmosis plants. This allows people to get water at a reasonable price at the coastal belt where the drinking water crisis is accurate. And this model at the same time is contributing to women empowerment. There are several other examples like rainwater harvesting plants, pond sand filters, etc., which we provide at the communities, schools, and institutions, and those are being managed by the communities, demonstrating locally led adaptation solutions to combat the climate change.
Thank you, Haseen. Wonderful. And we look forward to digging into that a bit further later. Perry, I would like to now come over to you. Perry Rivera joins us from the Philippines. Perry, the Philippine Water Supply and Sanitation Master Plan is a national action plan to achieve universal access to safe, sufficient, affordable, and sustainable water supply, hygiene, and sanitation by 2030. This is a fabulous example of a government planning ahead, drawing upon the expertise of WASH players as it developed critical components of the plan, and collaborating with the private sector to develop something that aligns with the realities, but also the priorities of all parties. Perry, can you please share with us about how the master plan creates a predictable environment, a bit like David was speaking about earlier, where partnerships and finance for climate resilient WASH can thrive in the Philippines?
Hello everyone. I'm Perry Rivera. I'm advisor and former COO of Manila Water. Alex, you used the term predictable environment. I think it's so crucial based on my experience the past two and a half decades, because it really creates good partnerships, attracts good players to the sector, and most of all, it also mobilizes capital. Obviously, I'd like kudos goes to the Philippine government for drafting the master plan. I recently reviewed it. It's a very thick book or document because it's quite interesting to see a very detailed master plan, because it acts as a blueprint for stakeholders like Manila Water and other players in the sector, obviously involved in the provision of WASH services. Please note that the capital requirements to implement that master plan is about $20 billion. That's roughly $2 billion every year between now and 2030. And half of it will have to be financed by the capital market and private equity. So it's very important to have a predictable environment and having a solid regulatory framework. You know, I represent the private sector. The private sector evaluates opportunities, and if there is a clear, predictable environment, they bring in wash technology, working with other players in the sector to be able to, including the government, to be able to address the wash goals. The third point that I'd like to share is mobilization of capital through financial markets will require certain preconditions for you to attract capital from the market. It has to a clear set of policies should exist, and that clarity is being sought by investors. Once that is put in place, I think a project or the sector will be able to mobilize a lot of capital. Let me cite our experience during the past 25 years. With good enabling framework, good contract, and I think we also perform as a water operator, we mobilized $2 billion over that period, and it doubled the impact of our services from 3 million to 7.5 million people in the east zone of Metro Manila. It is also very important, which is the fourth point, is affordable, cost-reflective pricing of wash services is very, very important to ensure that the sector continues to attract capital and continue to be in that virtuous cycle. I personally experienced that, actually. The last point that I'd like to share with the viewers, the markets, to be able to respond to climate change challenges, will have to be restructured. As we speak, our Congress has a few very important water bills that will address market fragmentation and ensure that leadership and governance and accountability, which is very important, will be embedded in the policy framework. I hope with this master plan and the leadership from government and the policy framework, we will be able to convene a critical mass of players that would make a difference in the water sector, including in Metro Manila and other areas. Thank you.
Thank you, Perry. Wonderful. And Mr. Baratlal, I'd like to come back to you now. So Perry's speaking about the extent of planning and some of the levers that have been pulled in the Philippines to achieve this progress and achieve the ambitious goals of 2030. The Jal Jeevan mission is also quite ambitious. Can you share with us about what are the levers that are being pulled specifically around partnerships and finance to hit the target on time?
Thanks, Alex. Well, as you understand that a program like this, which is basically scale is too big, and we have to implement with speed. So I think we are deriving a lot of strength from people's, power, and the whole program is implemented in decentralized manner. It's a basically community-managed decentralized program, and the approach is that wherever water supply system exists, it has to be augmented, retrofitted, improved, and made fit for next 30 to 40 years. And it should be JGM compliant, which means basically every family should be able to get tap water supply at the rate of minimum 55 liters per person per day of prescribed quality with pressure. So that is being done. Second thing is that let's understand that in India, for a country like us, now we are having 600,000 plus implementing agencies on the ground. These are local self-government. So in every village, wherever local source is available, basically they have to build single village water supply scheme. Wherever water quality problems are there, treatment plant has to be done. And 1/3 part of the country where local water sources are basically are having some kind of contamination or basically sustainable sources is missing. In those areas, bulk water transfer, distribution network, treatment plant, and then in-village water supply system. So this approach has been followed. But most importantly, to ensure that A, electricity consumption is less, B, people have less recurring costs. So we are going in a very big way, solarization of water supply schemes. Solar pump and panels are being installed. And wherever possible, especially in northern India, which is Himalayan range as well as forested area, we go for gravity-based water supply system. Similarly, we are using technology in a very, very big way. Digital governance is the key and basically driving force. So planning, implementation, monitoring, and including service delivery is managed through digital governance. So we are installing sensor-based IoT solution. In fact, all our assets are being geotagged. All our water quality monitoring is being done in automated mode, and we have learned a lot from COVID-19 testing protocol, basically. So those knowledge are being transferred here, that monitoring, implementation, and all those things should be done in a very decentralized manner. Lastly, what we have done that for a single village scheme, depending on population, we have also developed certain type design, and which can be locally modified. Similarly, for tendering, the same kind of procedure, item rate tendering, that in one go you do the tendering process, and people can implement the scheme as per their need, as per their understanding, as per their So end of the day, what we are trying to do is that to simplify the procedure, mobilize communities' strength in planning, implementation, and basically bottom-up approach. So they are involved with this survey, or so implementation becomes faster and much easier. And lastly, all this information, basically, if I'll request audience to type on their phone, JJM, Jal Jeevan Mission Dashboard. So this whole information up to village level, 600,000 villages information is available in public domain, on your laptop, on your phone, and you can see the planning, implementation, modeling. So this kind of transparency in governance is helping in speedier implementation, faster implementation. So thanks, Alex, and over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Baratlal. Excellent. Well, we've had the opportunity to hear from, I think, 4 incredible case studies where we're seeing a framework for solutions, where climate resilient wash, but also to larger ambitions around the SDGs and around the Paris Agreement, where we can learn from places where these approaches are working. So we've seen a vision of India, the policy environment in Kenya, the inclusivity and access in Bangladesh, and the planning of the Philippines. I'd now like to open it up to our speakers for more discussion, as we have very ambitious targets set before us and very ambitious commitments, which will take each and every one of us learning from each of these positive case studies. Partnerships and finance is the theme for today's discussion. I would love to hear, David, perhaps we'll come first to you, about Sanergy's experience around innovative partnerships and also innovative financing models.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Yeah, no, this has been it's been great just to be able to hear both from Minister Lal as well as from Perry and on what's happened in bigger places than where we are working here in Kenya. No, I mean, I think right now we're trying to just Sanergy's personal experience is just how do we actually enact these innovative financing partnerships, because there are good things happening, right? The policy environment is right. I think there's increased amount of climate financing coming in. We're starting to see that. And yet the prioritization still needs to be for sanitation in low-income areas or people in the lowest income quintiles. And we have already learned pretty significantly through some work that the World Bank did, where they reviewed their own financing of water and sanitation work over the last 10 years or so. And 56% of their money ended up going to the richest quintile, and only 8% ended up to the lowest quintile. And this was actually with the effort to have smart subsidy programs in place and such. That's a little, that's, I think, a bit of a reflection that without really pronounced prioritization of serving low-income areas, we're not gonna hit any of these targets, especially just as we look at the growth, but also that prioritization can't just come from the private sector. It needs to be reiterated by government and the financiers too. And so what we're doing is working to actually put together financing mechanisms that actually incentivize this, and where we ourselves end up getting our costs covered by being able to serve people in the way that is expected, or if not in terms of people, in terms of waste, right, or in terms of carbon offsets, it's all an equation that can be sort of the inputs into that can all produce the same kind of outcomes. And so that's what we've been working on, working closely with social finance, which is one of the preeminent organizations that's doing results-based financing and such. And this is, and we see this as like a very progressive way. We have the government very excited about what we're trying to do here also, with that prioritization too. And so that's what we're doing. Yeah.
Thanks, David. And Haseen, I'd like to come back to you as I know Wateraid Bangladesh's work in Bangladesh reviewing climate finance and the policies has been so extensive. Could you share with us what is sort of the next step that you see in Bangladesh for this ecosystem between service providers like yourselves and enablers and the government to accelerate progress to WASH and climate goals?
Thank you. Let me share an interesting finding from one of the recent studies conducted by Wateraid. Every $1 spent to make the water interventions resilient can avoid at least $62 spent on post-flood restoration work. This is an important figure and analysis, and we need to understand how we can implement this to having better resilient infrastructure. And government and development partners should spend for resilient infrastructure development to avoid future burden. And we are pursuing for that. And especially we have seen that the WASH policies and subsequent implementation actually do not consider the long-term climate change impacts. So how the government can take care of these, and also the development organizations, we are now working on that. To me, actually, SDG 6 and SDG 13 cannot be seen isolatedly. Those must be addressed comprehensively so that no one leaves behind. So, and for that, that financing is essential, be that climate financing or from private sector, and we need more financing for ensuring sustainable WASH services for the people. Thank you.
Thank you, Haseen. Now, absolutely, we know that progress on WASH is progress against any of the other 17 SDGs, and certainly towards our agreements made in Paris. Perry, I would like to jump over to you now. You've had an incredible and remarkable career in this space and have, I think, in my opinion, quite a bit of wisdom. I would love to hear your reflections on the comments of David and Haseen, and where do you see the opportunities for our sector, water and sanitation, and those working in climate to partner for the future?
Thank you very much, Alex. I think they raised very good points. Our experience in in Manila, especially addressing the base of the pyramid. If you recall, when we started, there were millions of people that were not connected to the grid. And Manila Water obviously made it a priority to provide services to nearly 2 million people. That's a major, out of that 7 million, 2 million base of the pyramid is included in that served population. How did we achieve that? Number one is we adopted a new organizational structure that made the organization very flat and allow our people to interact directly with the customers, especially those that are not receiving our service. Number two is work very closely with what we call barangay or street leaders in these communities, because at the end of the day, they will help us secure support of the stakeholders. So there is a social innovation part of it, okay? The second is working very closely with lending institutions like the World Bank and IFC, because we were one of the largest recipients of the global program for output-based aid. We were very successful in implementing that and taking advantage of that facility. The third is obviously trying to continuously innovate so that we can deliver good service. Please note that we were able to reduce system loss, which is, I think, from 65% to low teens. Right now, it's 13%. We were able to attain that because of innovative way of addressing that problem in collaboration with small and medium scale contractors, with community leaders. At the end of the day, they have to take ownership of the water asset. So just like what my colleagues mentioned, David, I think it's very important. Partnerships are crucial. And what we have achieved convinced the capital market that we are a bankable project. So in 2006, the company was listed, and we continue to mobilize required capital investment because the industry is so capital intensive. So our role is obviously share our best practices and experience, and every project varies from country to country. Thank you.
Thank you, Perry. I'd like to now come to each of our four speakers for a final thought. So Mr. Baratlal, I'd like to begin with you. And my question is what excites you the most right now as you look ahead for your mission and for India in this space? What excites you in the morning to come into work and tackle this with your partners?
Well, Alex, when you see in the morning, we have a system where people working in the field, they send us photographs, video, and basically whatever has been done yesterday. And when you see those smiling photographs of women and girls having tap water in their homes, I think that gives a kind of sense of satisfaction, and that motivates us to do much better. And secondarily, when we see that drudgery of women and girls, basically, that is being taken care of. You see that, diseases in certain areas which were known for waterborne diseases, especially children. If that information, that data is, and that disease is coming down, I think that gives us immense satisfaction to all of us, to my whole team who's working, to everyone. Thank you, Lex.
Thank you. Yes, absolutely. The impact in our sector, in water and sanitation, is palpable and is absolutely a vibrant motivator, I would imagine, for each of us. Thank you. And I also hear and receive well our storytelling, I think, is one that Honestly, as a sector, I think we have room to grow. We do it well in our local markets, but particularly settings like these, platforms like these, where we can share what is working and the solutions and the positive impacts are paramount and important going forward. David, I'd like to come to you next. Your perspective in Kenya, you are a pioneer. And I'll say that again, but you have weathered the storm and are at a pinnacle, I think, of entering now into a new season for your business. What would your words of encouragement to those that are listening today be as you reflect on the season behind and the exciting season ahead for Sanergy?
Yeah, no. I mean, what excites me is a little bit boring, is like a very predictable policy environment. That is actually something that is a fundamental game changer. These aren't things that, it's sort of hard. Sometimes it's hard to see that, but it just has such consequences because it states what the government will then prioritize. It assures the investment community, and we still need most of this investment will come from outside of Kenya. It assures them, and then this whole, I mean, I think, sometimes in the WASH sector, like we have this challenge of tying what we're doing and how climate positive it actually is, because it's sort of, perhaps because it's maybe a no-brainer, is how people see it. Others, but the progress that's now being made there, and sanitation in particular being able to be attached to a movement that everybody cares about, which was not always the case with sanitation, and that's something that we have to own as a sector. But the real threat of climate change, and the impact that climate change has had on our communities, it's linking what like Sanergy and other organizations are doing to what to what is sort of very mainstream, and with that that actually helps us significantly, and doesn't make our ideas sound so radical, but rather actually very practical and smart for achieving our goals. So, thanks.
Thank you, David. A predictable policy environment can certainly be very, very exciting. And Hassine, then to you, specifically looking at inclusivity and bringing in and hearing from the voices that we're not usually hearing from, unfortunately. Can you speak to briefly for a closing moment and thought on how Wateraid is doing this and what we can learn as a global audience today from your leadership in this space?
Thank you so much. Let me tell you from your earlier question that what excites us actually. So the thing I should refer here that in Bangladesh we have a very good number of policies in place. So policies and strategies are there, and that addresses the issue of inclusiveness and everything, be that for climate hotspot areas or outreach areas for the people with disabilities or other issues. So at policy level, we have very good documents in place. And if you look at the budget allocation of the government of Bangladesh, it is increasing by many folds over the last few years as we track budget of government, so we can confidently say that. Now, coming to the WASH sector, in case of sanitation, we have achieved open defecation-free status, as per JMP, and we are sustaining that status. So this is another issue that we should be proud of. But what is happening that when we start working at field, especially when we try to address inclusiveness, so then the cost of operation gets higher. So this is not typical implementation. When you need to reach to the bottom 5% people, the cost of operation really goes very high. So unless specific financing issues are not addressed properly, or adequate financing is not coming, it is very difficult to reach the hard to reach the people of the last mile and may ensure the inclusiveness of the whole project or of the whole effort. So my take will be that we should water budget and climate budget should be built in partnership, and we should address the long-term climate change impacts in our world and make the water wash interventions resilient so that people can get benefit out of this. Thank you.
Wonderfully said. Perry, then to you. What excites you also in the morning to come to this to work in this sector in terms of our future?
Alex, like you, I'm passionate about the wash sector. I look back for over the past 25 years. I think we made a difference, but I'm also, to be honest, concerned about the future because if we don't address and become resilient, the impact on the wash sector will be so widespread and negative. And at the end of the day, it will be the poor that will be disproportionately affected by lack of resiliency. Okay, so what makes me I will always be passionate about the sector because I like every time we implement a project, you can see that you're really changing the quality of life of people who are not receiving a good service. I think going forward, while we have achieved and personally been fortunate to be to have played a key role in implementing these projects, I think the challenge for me and the other players in the sector is to continuously innovate and review the models that worked in the past, which may not work in the future. So inclusivity of the business model is very important. But at the same time, while it is inclusive, I think there's nothing wrong in ensuring that the inclusive model is also a bankable model. You could just imagine if you can innovate and present to a lender that affects the lives of so many people, but at the same time, you will generate reasonable rates of return. That's a win-win. That's the role of the private sector in collaboration with organizations like you, as well as other partners and stakeholders. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Perry. And thank you to each of our panelists. We've greatly appreciated your voice and your wisdom today. I think what has come through loud and clear is that there are great examples in water and sanitation of innovative ways governments, together with the private development and finance sectors, are creating ecosystems and markets where climate resilient wash can thrive, achieving the SDGs and progressing our climate goals. We've heard the importance of designing the policy and financial instruments to foster climate positive innovation and sustainable service delivery through market development. We've heard the importance of designing inclusivity for climate vulnerable populations and partnering with them to implement solutions. And we've heard the importance of developing multi-year plans that create an enabling and predictable environment for partnerships and finance for climate resilient wash to thrive. The Toilet Board Coalition today and in this event was also representing the private sector constituency of sanitation and water for all. And we would like to invite you to continue this conversation with us. We're organizing a series of regional workshops in February of next year to present an open opportunity for dialogue on wash and climate between private sector and government stakeholders. We aim to bring alignment between participants on how the private sector and government's work on WASH can further climate mitigation, adaptation, and resilience goals. We aim to discuss practical and approachable ways the private sector is and can be working to contribute to NDCs through their work on WASH, and to host an open conversation about challenges, bottlenecks, and accelerators from similar cases around the globe. going to very briefly share a slide with a QR code and a website link that you can navigate to register your interest to participate in those regional dialogues and workshops. All are welcome, and we would love to have you and your voice at the table. So most certainly, please do join us. And Lesley, I hand it back over to you. Thank you so much for having us today. It's been an honor and a pleasure to dialogue with these incredible panelists, and we look forward to the latter half of the session.
Thank you for that, Alex. That was, I'm struggling a little bit for words. That was a really great, wonderful panel, and a really great, so many wonderful issues that were brought up and discussed and analyzed in a very limited amount of time. That said, I do want to give everybody time to take a break, catch up a little bit with the rest of, with all of their personal needs, etc. So we are actually going to break for what are now 4 minutes. And we will reconvene here for the second exciting roundtable, really digging into that private sector perspective and lens at exactly 2:20 UK time. So 4 minutes, go get your water, go visit your toilet, and come right back to hear more. So thank you. right. Well, I hope everybody feels a little bit more refreshed and energized and ready for an exciting next round of conversations. So with that, I am about to hand us over to someone who is coming to you live from Glasgow, Jason Morrison of Pacific Institute, CEO, Water Mandate, and the Water Resilience Coalition.
Great. Thank you, Lesley. Good to see you. And welcome, everyone. Good afternoon. Good morning for those tying in from the Americas, and good evening for the night owls that may be taking this meeting in the middle of the night in Asia and Pacific region. As Lesley mentioned, my name is Jason Morrison. I serve as the Pacific Institute president and also the head of the CO Water Mandate, which is a 13-year-old corporate water stewardship initiative that the Pacific Institute partners with the UN Global Compact to manage. It now has over 200 members, and we have focused on the issue of WASH for a number of years now. And in fact, businesses, leading businesses in the corporate stewardship arena have been understanding the need to take action on WASH, both in the workplace, but also in supply chains and in the communities where workers live. And in fact, there's been a consortium that we'll hear about later on today called the WASH for Work initiative, which is made up of some of these leading companies and NGO partners and UN agencies as well. I want to say a couple of remarks about what we think is happening in the shift around action on WASH and climate resilient WASH. I think there are increasingly companies that are recognizing that their actions and engagements on WASH need to be future-proofed in the sense that the traditional approach to philanthropy and leading to taps and toilets is not sufficient in the face of climate change and these evolving water systems and the risk that that poses for frontline communities that, as we know, are disproportionately impacted by climate change first and worst. So the recognition that we need to shift towards climate resilience in our thinking and our approaches to WASH. The other thing I want to highlight very quickly is the recognition that leading businesses are starting to elevate their ambition on WASH. Some of you may have heard of a recent collective action initiative within the CO Water Mandate called the Water Resilience Coalition. And as part of that coalition, the member companies that are committing to taking action include the notion of positive impact on water in water-stressed regions. And the way we're defining positive impact is not only on water quantity and water quality, but on water accessibility and making sure that that social dimension of water is addressed. The other element of the ambition I want to talk about is the WRC's 2030 ambition to enable climate resilient WASH for over 100 million people in 100 water-stressed basins. And that's the type of ambition that now is really catalyzing the need for urgent action and to better define what we mean by climate resilient WASH and how we're going to measure it. So I'm very excited to get into today's discussion to unpack that a bit and hear what different stakeholders think about this issue and how leading companies are taking action on the matter. So I'm going to do a quick agenda review, but I am not going to spend a bunch of time in between speakers shepherding the conversation. So as agreed, speakers, talking to you, you will hand to the next speaker in line, and if you see me come up to the podium with the microphone, that's not a good thing. That means you've gone over your time. So I ask that you stay within your allocated minutes. Next up after me will be Virginia Newton-Lewis with Wateraid. She's going to talk about how Wateraid's been defining climate resilient WASH and what they believe to be the role of the private sector. She will hand to Cheryl Hicks, the lead on the Water WASH for Work initiative, and she's going to explain how this initiative is working and some of the lessons learned through member company experiences. Then we're going to turn to Mark Dennison with Evershed Sutherland, and he's going to speak a little bit about how we can leverage green financing to support these sustainability efforts, including WASH. And then we're going to turn to two companies to talk about their experiences. One was Diageo, and Kate Gibson is going to speak to what they're doing and have been doing for a number of years now. And then here in the room with me is Marina Munez-Rossi from Braskem, our newest WRC member that got announced here at COP. We're very excited about this. And she's going to talk about some of the work they've been doing around circularity in Sao Paulo and how that builds climate resilience in the region and has community benefits. I will then try my best to wrap up with a summary of what we've heard, and I will hand back to Lesley to close us. So thank you, and with that, I am handing to Virginia.
Thank you so much, Jason, and good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to give you a very quick overview of what we mean when we talk about climate resilience and WASH and the role that business can play in addressing this challenge. This is an important topic because climate change is moving the goalposts and making achieving universal access to water, sanitation and hygiene not only a more difficult challenge, but also a more urgent one. This is particularly true for countries already experiencing high levels of climate variability, where we see climate change amplifying existing variability and bringing greater uncertainty. When we talk about climate resilient WASH and what is required, it can be a little bit confusing because the word resilience can mean different things. And on top of that, it isn't always clear what we're asking to be climate resilient. Is it communities or is it WASH services, infrastructures and behaviours? Well, in fact, it's all of this. Firstly, we want WASH services to be resilient to climate change impacts. So, for example, resilient to the higher temperatures and rising sea levels that affect water resources, or resilient to the potential damage to infrastructure through floods and droughts. And secondly, we also want to highlight how access to WASH improves community resilience, for example, through the benefits of having a reliable drinking water supply in an unreliable climate. And building resilient communities, and in building resilient communities, there's a powerful ripple effect, which helps build more resilient supply chains for businesses. One simple way to unpack resilience and to get some clarity around what can be quite confusing is to ask some basic framing questions. So the resilience of what, the resilience for whom and to what. And if we want to get into even more detail, we can start to ask what type of resilience we mean. So, for example, do we want services and infrastructure to adapt, to recover, or to reorient after shocks? Recently, we've been working to clarify our definition of climate resilient WASH. So Wateraid now defines it in the following way. We talk about WASH services and behaviours that continue to deliver benefits or that are appropriately restored within a changing climate context and despite climate-induced hazards. Strong WASH systems can improve resilience to climate change. You'll see this definition reflects these two types of resilience, one about WASH services and behaviours, and one about how access to strong WASH systems improves resilience. The latter is particularly important because it means that universal access to WASH is an intervention that supports wider climate change adaptation efforts. In other words, having access to things like safely managed sanitation and hygiene services, we can ensure the reduced risk of water supply contamination in times of flooding and further mitigate risks of knock-on health crises. This all contributes to community resilience, supply chain resilience, and economic resilience. So what does climate resilient WASH look like in terms of services and infrastructure? Of course, we have exciting innovation and technology with reverse osmosis and the use of solar panels and flood resilient designs for various other infrastructures. But we need to make sure that we focus on much more than just technology. What's critical is that climate resilient WASH systems use inclusive risk-based planning focused on addressing inequalities. We need to see the development of appropriate coping strategies, the implementation of high quality, robust WASH options, and the strengthening of WASH systems. So my take-home message today is to make sure that we are looking beyond the tech and the infrastructure. Climate resilience means considering the whole WASH system and mainstreaming climate change interventions into wider programming and system strengthening approaches. Wateraid has several examples of this type of work, from community actions to understand and manage water risks in rural Burkina Faso and Ghana, to working in schools and communities to increase water availability through rainwater harvesting in Mozambique. And beyond our work with communities, we are working at the global level to speed up access to climate finance through the Resilient Water Accelerator, so that we get money where it's needed to ensure climate resilient WASH. For business and the private sector, we know that climate resilience is crucial for workforces. We know that climate resilient WASH investment can increase productivity and reduce absenteeism across the workforce by preventing WASH-related diseases, reducing operational costs, and strengthening the social license to operate. We've seen this in action in work in Bangladesh, implementing climate resilient wash solutions in apparel factories. So, for example, things like rainwater harvesting is reducing the reliance on groundwater. This also reduces factory operating costs, reduces competition for scarce water resources amongst the local community, and again, improves that social license to operate that I mentioned earlier. We'd like to see more examples like this. So with Wash for Work, Wateraid works directly with global businesses who have operations in countries that are most vulnerable to the effects of climate change. This presents an opportunity to support thinking on climate resilient wash and to support the building of resilience in supply chains and workforces to drive prosperous business. So with that very rapid overview of the definition of what we mean by climate resilient wash, and having given you some examples, I'm going to hand over to Cheryl Hicks from Wash for Work to tell you about that initiative. Thank you.
Thank you, Virginia. Hello, everyone. Let me start by providing a brief introduction to the Wash for Work initiative. Wash for Work was founded in 2016 to bring together corporate leaders with expert organizations in the water, sanitation, and hygiene sector to mobilize business action on wash in the workplace, including ensuring access to wash in companies' own operations, their supply chains, and the communities where they operate. Today, there are 20 global companies and 14 WASH expert organizations that are part of the Wash for Work platform, and over 300 companies worldwide that have signed the WASH Pledge, which is a part of this platform. So how are companies taking action on WASH? In our current context of climate change and COVID-19, there's an elevated importance for companies on building resilience, as we've just heard. What we're seeing for the first time is a critical mass in corporate leadership on WASH. And this is really significant, with businesses elevating WASH as a priority in their corporate water stewardship commitments, demonstrating best practice, evolving the business case, and signaling that WASH has become a business critical issue for companies of all sizes to address. So what does company best practice in WASH look like? Companies leading on WASH have the following attributes. They have a policy on water stewardship that includes WASH. They're ensuring access to WASH facilities, drinking water, sanitation, and personal hygiene facilities in their own operations, and especially in the most difficult contexts. They're working to include comprehensive WASH approaches, including feminine care facilities, personal hygiene promotion and training, and hydration promotion and training. They are extending WASH best practice requirements to suppliers and ensuring WASH facilities are implemented in communities where their workers live. And they're proactively advocating to have WASH included in reporting and disclosure requirements of corporate ESG, or environment, social, and governance standards, including the impact of WASH investments on business performance. The Wash for Work membership have developed the business case for prioritizing WASH and business guidance tools for companies at every step of their WASH engagement pathway. This includes how to measure direct business benefits that relate to core business value, indirect business benefits that relate to wider corporate purpose, and how to measure and report on financial value. The topic of this day at COP26 is climate resilient WASH, and the next agenda for corporate water stewardship includes climate resilient WASH. Choices of WASH infrastructure matter to ensure they will stand up to broader climate change and health risks. In 2021, the Wash for Work initiative has started a dialogue amongst the membership to raise the ambition and build consensus on how we define climate resilient WASH and what steps companies can take to implement it as a part of their corporate water stewardship strategies. Just a few highlights from our dialogue so far are what will be critical is understanding how climate risks such as drought, flooding, sea level rise, uncertain weather, and disease affect the provision of WASH services to the most vulnerable in operations, supply chains, and communities. Identifying how WASH access can contribute to climate change solutions through some circular approaches, as well as we'll hear from some of our corporate speakers. Implementing water and energy efficient WASH services, linking climate resilience to community livelihoods and resilience, leveraging climate co-financing, and integrating climate resilience into WASH systems design from the start. As a company, how can you get started on your climate resilient WASH journey in your workplace? Take the WASH Pledge and join the WASH for Work platform. Join us in this dialogue to build consensus on climate resilient WASH. Thank you. I'd now like to hand over to Mark.
Thank you very much, Cheryl. It's really interesting. I'm Mark Dennis, and I'm Head of Infrastructure and a Project Finance Partner at Evershed Sutherland, which is a global law firm. So now we're going to turn to the question of how organisations can leverage green finance to help support climate resilient WASH and water projects. And I'm going to do this in two parts. So the first section, I'm going to look at what the green finance landscape now looks like alongside Resilient Water Accelerator and other means to raise finance and as part of the wider WASH-Fin landscape, and how that green finance landscape can benefit water resilient WASH and water projects. And then I'm going to wrap up by just saying a few words about what we as an organisation think that banks, investors and developers who already are active in green finance, but not necessarily as focused as they should be on water, do more to support the water agenda in light of recent developments in green finance. So firstly, what does green finance, the green finance landscape look like? So there's been a number of different instruments which have emerged over the last 5 or so years, really, which all do slightly different things. So firstly, sustainability-linked loans or bonds. So SLLs are instruments which are designed to facilitate environmentally and socially sustainable economic growth and activity. And they do that by incentivizing the borrower to achieve certain ambitious KPIs. So it might be reducing greenhouse gas emissions or improving energy efficiency. And if they do that, the borrower gets a preferential rate of interest. So the cost of their debt is lower. And the Loan Market Association lists the purposes for which SLLs can be used for, and they, of course, do include water projects. Another one to mention is social loans. The objective of social loans is to serve underserved people, including groups of underserved people affected by natural disasters, which can, of course, include water-related ones. Transition bonds are to fund borrower or issuers' transition towards change, so reduced environmental impact or lower carbon emissions. And of course, these two can include local water challenges in which that company operates. And then the final one I wanted to mention is green loans. This is more of a general term to talk to loans which are to finance new and or eligible green projects. And as well with that, the Loan Market Association sets the principles. And it will hopefully be apparent from what I've just said that all of these types of finance can be structured to assist in climate resilient WASH and water projects. Now, we heard earlier from a number of speakers about the capital markets and how it's very clear, I think, to many of us on this panel discussion that funding through capital markets is a complicated business. There's credit ratings to take into account, often pooled fund structures which require multiple credit ratings to work. They're complex and they don't come together quickly. There are, however, more than 30 of these structures around the world, of which you'll hopefully see, though, from what I'm saying, that zooming into green finance specifically is actually a simpler or perhaps does reveal simpler opportunities which are worth exploring. And I think just before we go on to some particular action points, I think one of the great things we've seen about green finance is its scalability from startups who've then grown to become much more significant players in the sustainable agenda. Just moving away from water very briefly, but we've seen portfolios of renewable energy projects in Brazil, rural telecoms infrastructure across multiple African countries, and solar projects in the likes of Bangladesh and Pakistan. And things are moving very quickly because in some of those markets, there wasn't a certified green bond for certain types of technology just 3 years ago. And another, I think, important point to mention in the context of green finance is the increased participation of the world's leading financial guarantors to give comfort to investors and banks. So organizations such as Garanco have got sustainable projects as a priority now. We've heard about other organizations just this week who've launched with a particular focus on green guarantees for sustainable developments. So then just finally, what can banks, investors and those developing types of sustainable project do to really support the water agenda? So I think one really interesting piece of low-hanging fruit with sustainability-linked loans is where you have a borrower in a developed market which is not meeting its KPIs, and the bank is charging a higher rate of interest. The question is, what do you do with that interest? It's seen as unethical for banks to keep it, and a common option is to actually just give it to charity. But I think a possibly better way of structuring the solution is actually to pool those increased margins and use the bank's expertise to put that capital towards infrastructure in exactly the types of wash for work projects which have just been mentioned, which of course goes to one of the overarching messages for today, which is about designing policy and financial instruments to foster climate positive innovation and sustainable service delivery. And then very finally then on developers, what can developers do who are looking to really assist in the wash space? So I think one of the really interesting aspects of green finance for me is that typically it straddles more than one area. So we see corporates specializing, for example, community housing, raising cheaper finance because they will provide, at the same time as the housing, work-ready employment and training for young people in their area. So it's really not a stretch to see how you could combine clean energy developers creating new net zero energy technologies, really as part of their financing strategy, implement water project implementation in the areas and the communities where they build that net zero technology, which of course will just reduce the cost of the capital and the cost of the debt that they use in those technologies. And in an era of subsidy-free clean energy, all of that is entirely plausible. We don't need the same level of government subsidy or support that we did for those projects to come through. So that's actually all I wanted to say on green finance. I'm now going to hand over to Kate Gibson, who's Global Director of Society at Diageo.
Thank you very much, Mark, and delighted to be here with you all speaking to you. And what I wanted to do over the next few minutes is just, I guess, knit together some of the themes we've already heard today, and then bring to life perspective from the private sector in terms of why an investment in water stewardship, and particularly in WASH, is absolutely critical for community development, but also long-term business success. So Diageo is a global beverage company, and as such, water is an absolutely essential ingredient in all of our products. And more importantly, it's absolutely fundamental for all of the communities where we live, work, source, and sell. And that's why we've been focusing on water stewardship for the past 2 decades. And we've been doing that through embedding it in our operations, through a focus on water use efficiency, and that's ongoing, but also embedding water stewardship and water replenishment across our communities, our value chain, our local sourcing areas, and then in particular advocating for more private sector investment and involvement in water stewardship, and particularly WASH. And I think it's great that meetings like this are happening today, and there is a positive momentum of understanding in terms of this movement. And of course, we all know that that the climate crisis and the water crisis are linked, and both are getting worse, and of course disproportionately impact women and girls and other vulnerable groups in society. So I think we also really recognize and celebrate the recognition, and we've already heard it earlier on today about SDG 6, and just how achieving the targets for SDG 6 are such a powerful unlock for many of the other SDGs in this critical decade of action to 2030. And over the past decade, working in partnership with Wateraid, Wash for Work, UN CEO Water Mandate, and many others, we've been engaged in a lot of corporate water stewardship work, and we have provided access to WASH to over 10 million people, and that's through 250 projects in 18 countries. And the experience that we've had and the learnings that we've had, we've been actively sharing and are very keen to share, and they've really informed the work that we want to do in the coming decade to 2030. And we've recently released our Society 2030 Spirit of Progress plan, and water stewardship and a focus on WASH is absolutely front and center in that. We will continue to embed water use efficiency across our operations globally, especially in water-stressed areas. We're ramping up our focus in water replenishment with a commitment to replenish the equivalent of over 4 billion liters of water. And we'll do this through 150 community water stewardship projects with a particular focus in terms of access to clean water, sanitation, and hygiene. And also continuing the work we've been doing in partnership partnership around advocating for more collective action in water-stressed basins. And we heard Jason referring to that at the top of the session. And of course, we know that so many of these issues are often upstream, and all of the actors need to come together in order to address of the real challenges and ensure a sustainable long-term future. So we're absolutely delighted that conversations like this are happening today, and really committed to do more. So what I wanted to do now is just share a few thoughts in terms of the business case from a private perspective around why an investment in WASH is so important. And I think one of the themes that's coming through loud and clear through all the speakers is the link between water and resilience. And of course, that's true for community development, but that's also true for long-term business success. And that's why it's so critical for us. And there is a very compelling business case for private sector organizations to invest in WASH. And that is very much around well-being, productivity, and resilience of operations, of our workforce, of our sourcing communities, other members of our value chain, and of course also the communities around where we live, work, source, and sell. And that's why we've been investing in it for 2 decades. We've been working with Wateraid, for example, in many countries such as Nigeria, Ethiopia, and Ghana. And one thing we've certainly learned over the past decade in particular, and it's come up already in this conversation, is the need for water, sanitation, and hygiene solutions to be inclusive and to be designed not only to provide this critical resource, but also to empower and create the unlock in terms of economic and community development. And I guess one example, just to bring this to life for you, is some work that we've been doing recently in Tanzania, and that's with sorghum farmers that are in our value chain, of which 50% are women. And we've done an inclusively designed WASH program, which really puts women and girls at the heart of it. And what that allows is that it allows women who are working in our agricultural value chain to spend less time getting access to clean water, both for household use, but also for their crops. And that leads to greater productivity, greater well-being, higher yields in terms of the crops that are then sold on to our breweries. So, and we've been actively partnering and piloting this as a means of trying to really prove that business case through some of those, the data and the numbers, as we heard earlier, as a means to try and share those learnings, but also encourage other private sector organizations to increase the focus in terms of WASH. And of course, companies have a real potential to build that resilience through a focus on WASH. And again, that's for the community, but that's also for business success. And of course, supporting water resiliency and this water secure future is absolutely critical in water stressed basins as well. And, in terms of partnership, I suppose is the other theme that we've heard loud and clear already. We know that these challenges are systemic. None of us can address them on our own. And we certainly value the partnership we've had with Wateraid, the UN CEO Water Mandate, WASH for Work. And we're also a founding member of the Water Resilience Coalition that we heard about earlier today from Jason. We're absolutely behind the pledge, the collective pledge to provide WASH to 100 million people by 2030. And that's absolutely critical for us. And I think we also work with other companies as well in terms of piloting these approaches to really help prove that business case. And I think finally, I'd say, obviously, we find ourselves at COP, and of course, global campaigns, multi-sector campaigns are absolutely critical. And we're very vocal supporters for the UN Race to Resilience campaign, which is the sister campaign of the Race to Zero. And we see this as absolutely critical to ensure that we have much more resilient communities and, of course, much more resilient businesses for the years ahead. So I hope I've helped to convince you of the really compelling business case for private sector organizations to focus on clean water, sanitation, and hygiene. Of course, the links with community resilience and development, and really the need for us to come together. And I guess my final call to action would be for all organizations in society to really work towards this water secure future that we really need. And it's fantastic that conversations like this are happening today. And I think this will really help to build further momentum so we can move at the pace we need. Thank you so much. Now I'm going to hand over to Marina Rossi from Braskem.
It's okay. Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here to share with you the Brasken's efforts in order to advance in our climate change agenda and also adaptation plan. So first of all, I'd like to present Brasken. Brasken, it is largest resin producer in America and also the largest producer of biopolymers. We had more than 40 facilities in the world and more than customers in more than 80 countries around the world. Our purpose is improving people's lives, create sustainable solutions for chemical and plastic. And during the last years, since our creation in 2002, we developed a sustainable development framework based on three pillars. The first one is regarding the process. So we are interested in promote the eco-efficiency process to reduce our impact. The second one is the products. So we invest a lot of efforts to promote renewables products to reduce our low carbon products, with low carbon footprint, and also that capture carbon of the atmosphere. And the third one, we are interested in offer sustainable solutions for the society. But in the basis of this framework is our culture and the management system to support our climate change strategy. And when I say management, I mean to focus, we are more interested in mitigation and adaptation. And regarding the adaptation plan, it's why I'm talking today, because I present for you a case of success of Brasken. We are focused in identify the climate risk and then develop an action plan to address our climate risks. And when we're talking about projects that we implement, one of these is our case in São Paulo. We develop in partnership with a sanitization company and also with a private company a project of reuse of water. This project called Aquapolo is the largest project in the South America. We basically transform domestic sewage in water of the quality to be used in the industry. This process, it's simple because in the same facility that you have the sanitization area, so we took the sewage and then we have the regular treatment, the primary, the secondary treatment of the sewage, and we add a third process a tertiary process that consists in a biological treatment and also a ultrafiltration system. And adding in this process, we include the osmosis reverse. And after this third process, we have the high quality water to be used in our industry. So after this process, we have a pipeline with 17 kilometers of long that becomes this water for foreign facilities in the Capuava complex in state of São Paulo. And this water, and 100% of the water used in the process of these foreign facilities is from the water we used. So it's amazing because we avoid to capture fresh water from the environment totally. And now it is so, this project was so important for us because as I mentioned we made assessment regarding climate risk, and the worst risk for Brasken is water stress. So this project able us not stop the operations during a water crisis that you have a few years ago. So the Aquapolo, just to give an idea and some numbers, these facilities produce 1,000 liters per second. And monthly, we avoid to capture, to consume from the environment more than 200 millions of water, of fresh water. So it means about 70 millions of the consumption of water. It's the same of 70 millions of people by month. It's a huge impact, and we are so proud of this project. I believe that we have a lot of benefits for the society, around society, around communities, and the best thing to say that this kind of project is high replicable. So we can do the same for other regions and other countries. And in this moment, we have the same kind of problem for other 2 regions in Brazil. We are studying the same solution for Duque de Caxias in Rio de Janeiro, and also for Maceió of state of Alagoas, and try to implement this kind of projects. The key word here is partnership. So it is the reason that we are here today, because this kind of projects involve a lot of people and the government and private companies and customer as Braskem. But we need to be together to increase and do this possible, right? And another one reason that we signed recently the Race to Resilience, and also the Water Resilient Coalition, because we believe that partnership is a key of this process. So thank you. I will pass for Jason. Thank you.
I hope it didn't intimidate speakers when I said that they must stay on time, because I think every speaker came under time throughout the entire program. But thanks all for your insights. And I'm going to do just a really quick review of some of the key things that I heard. There was a great content by each of the speakers. But just to start out with Virginia's observation that the shift to climate resilient wash really opens up this systems thinking and the need to think more holistically around how to connect the wash system or the wash solutions to the broader water systems in an integrated way. From Cheryl, we heard that the business case for action in wash has become clear, and we actually are very much understanding what leading practice looks like. There's opportunity to get on board. If you are a business and you have not yet done so, please consider signing the WASH Pledge to commit to the action that you'll take on WASH going forward. Mark talked about a range of opportunities to scale impact investing. I really like the idea of banks that are getting increased margins to pool that and invest in water infrastructure. What a great thing. I'd love to see the banks do that, or the institutional investors do that. It would be fantastic. Kate then talked about 20 years of experience that Diageo has had in the water stewardship space, many of those focused on WASH and having a positive impact on WASH solutions in communities in multiple countries, millions of communities that have been enabled access to WASH. But also spoke about the clear business benefits of enabling more resilient communities in the face of climate change through these investments in WASH. So again, the experience that leaders could share with others on lessons learned through those partnerships over the years. And Marina talking about this largest industrial reuse project in Latin America, the Aquapolo project, and how this project not only allowed a major industrial water user to forego the need for fresh water from the surrounding environs of Sao Paulo, but offset that pressure. But I understand from a previous presentation that it's actually wastewater supply is a very resilient supply, in that when there was a drought a few years ago, there were quite a few industrial consumers that had to get scaled back on production because of rationing of water, and that Braskem was able to be unfazed with their operations due to that supply that they had from the municipal wastewater utility. So there's, again, a business case clearly on some of these investments around circularity and the way that this can be done in a way that improves water security for the entire municipal area. In closing, I want to just end with a anecdote. And it's one that was told to me by somebody who was very close to the business community in Cape Town as Cape Town was nearing day zero. And the way that I understand the evolution of this journey was for businesses there is, of course, first concern about operational disruption. What is this going to mean for whether we have to close down? And scurrying to figure out alternative supply. Do we put a well in, and do we find a way to keep our company operating? But as the drought continued and the scarcity concerns continued, the companies were across the board recognizing that this isn't just a matter of our company's operations. Our employees don't have water in their homes, and they aren't even going to be able to come into work, but they're not even going to be able to bathe or wash. And there's just a real understanding that the company's connection to the security of water supply in the region is something that companies need to think about more expansively. And the really rapid journey that some of these businesses had just over a half year's time or a few months' time to really get that understanding about how water security and climate change and the impacts that climate change is going to have on water systems is going to sometimes cause deep disruption, not only to the business, but to the communities that the business and its employees work in. So I hope that most companies can come to this realization without a Cape Town Day Zero, but I think it's a telling and cautionary tale, I suppose, on how companies are starting to realize this need to think more holistically around the water systems in the region they're operating, and making sure that all the members of the community have access to water in the face of these increased prolonged dry periods and or increased wet periods. So with that, Lesley, I'm handing back over to you to take us home.
Thanks for that. Thanks for that, Jason. Yeah, so, and we're actually, this is quite exciting. We are so unified and excited about our message. We were actually able to move through all of our comments really fast. I think this is, both of these two different roundtables have really identified very complementary and different approaches to finance and partnership. And I would also like to highlight that the fact that we've been able to draw upon people from all over the world to have this conversation, and not everybody had to be physically there in the pavilion in Glasgow right now, shows how, shows how resilient we are all being, and we're responding, we're being flexible, we're adapting and innovating and coming up with new solutions. And, and that is really inspiring and sort of sets an example for what we can expect to do more and better in the future when we actually set our minds to this. We heard really what governments can be doing to set the stage with strong leadership, planning, vision, and also regulation, creating something of a predictable environment, but yet also being able to be flexible and respond in an ever evolving and ever changing climate, right? And then we also heard about the new ways that businesses have been rethinking their bottom line and how they are responding to actually integrate and incorporate more climate resilient and responses to their work. I think we've heard so many wonderful different perspectives and insights about the different ways finance can be brought to bear from the business side, from the different mechanisms that are available. I think what really just resonates with me over and above finally is just really the way in which all of this talks about partnership, right? This isn't a business doing it by itself. This is a business doing it in the context of the government, in, the regulatory environment in which they operate, and in coalition with all of these different partners. And I think the different breadth of people who've been speaking here today demonstrate how many of us are out there who have different but complementary expertise to offer, and the fact that we are all very excited to partner together because we do see what is ahead, and we do see that together we can really navigate this and make this a positive response to a changing climate, and also reduce the impact that we're collectively having. So I want to say thank you once again to all of our speakers, many of whom joined at different hours from the Philippines, from India, and then also my co-organizers, and really bringing everyone together today. The Water Pavilion, the Water and Climate Pavilion, the fact that we're all here together to really elevate these issues about water in the climate conversation has been a long time coming, and I'm thankful that we're all able to be here talking about these together. So with that, I'm giving everyone basically another 15 minutes out of their day. So thank you so much, and we look forward to engaging in more and different ways in this type of conversations, and look forward to being able to share more positive outcomes and partnerships that have been coming forward at the next COP. Thank you all.